Hi, I'm Tracy Nannery. I am the More Mentor. I love helping people be and have more in this one beautiful life we can give, and more health, more wealth, more joy, more fun, more freedom, more fulfillment, and learning to thrive, not just survive. And so I am so excited today to connect with Greg and be on the Connected Mindset.
Hello, everybody. I'm Greg Tomczyk. Welcome to the Connected Mindset podcast, where each week we bring you the stories to better connect with the world around you. Let's dive into this week's podcast.
Tracy Nannery. I'm a quote guy. There are a lot of leadership quotes out there that I gravitate towards. And one that comes to mind is chase vision, not money. And I'm curious of your perspective on how you continue the chase for vision, but still get the value through the money or through the things that you want to achieve as a part of that vision.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, probably the only quote that I probably consistently go to, well, there's two, and one is vision. Without a vision, the people will perish. And I think it's even more than that. I think without a vision, you will perish. And I think that's easy to do in the busy world that we live in, and especially with, executives and people that are constantly busy and reporting to others and developing others. It can be very easy to get lost in that. But I think if you have the proper vision, and money is a way to fuel that vision, it's pretty powerful. It's when you get lost in the money and you lose identity and vision that it can be a pretty lonely place when that role ends and you step into another chapter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we talk a lot about transition on this show because we've all been through huge transitions, whether we consciously look back and recognize those transitions and what lessons we've learned, but how important have the lessons from the different transitions you've gone through been for the person that you are today?
This is like my favorite question. So, life is full of transitions, and there's some transitions that we choose and some that we don't. But what we know for sure is they're going to happen. And I know in 2022, I had a lot of transitions come together at once. My dad passed in 21. My mom was extremely dependent on him. And so I was really becoming a parent to the parent. She was very dependent. And at the same time, my daughter was graduating from high school. So I was becoming an empty nester, and I was leaving a 30-year career. And so a lot of transitions going at once. I think it's easy in those transitions. So I call them monuments. I know a lot of psychologists will call them flashbulb moments, but kind of those key moments in life where there's a big transition, a big change, and a lot of emotion attached to it. So a common one that people rallied around was obviously 9/11. We remember exactly where we were, who we were with, what we were doing, who we called. And then in those moments where everything changed, you had people that really felt called to serve and bring people together. And then you had other people that stayed living in fear. And that's, to me, very typical of what happens in these transitions. I've done both. My sister passed in 2007, and I stayed pretty stuck in Groundhog Day, as I call it. And usually at that point, you're bringing in coping mechanisms, and a lot of times not great ones.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
For me, it was, drinking a little bit more, eating a little bit more. Mm-hmm. So I learned from that. I think anything that we do in life, if we can step back and learn so we can improve upon it next time. So as I continued to navigate transitions, I started thinking through what did I want to bring forward and what wasn't serving me. So that as I continued to navigate, I had a big transition in 2010. I was stepping out to become the first female youngest chief operating officer for a large organization. At this very same moment that I was waiting on the driver to take me to very cold Buffalo, New York in January, I learned that my husband was having an affair. Very same moment. And so I knew I had a choice. Was I going to stay stuck in Groundhog Day like I did when my sister died, or was I going to rise up and become an unrecognizable version of myself that I couldn't even necessarily see at that point? Well, I had a great urgency, and that was two small kids. So, it allowed me to propel forward. But I learned a lot from how I navigated that, so that in 2022, when I had these transitions merging together, kind of in the perfect storm, I felt well prepared to pull out all those lessons and navigate it in a way that was more effective, more efficient, more joyful, to come out onto the other side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't get easier, we get stronger.
Right.
I went through a very similar season at one point in time where it was like the perfect storm. It was the finding out about infidelity. I had an investor in a business I was in that was helping me set up for the future that decided to pull out. My business partner at the time was stealing like information and files. So it was something that you can't really prepare for. You can't draw it up to be
Right.
that way. But what you can do is take the tools and equipment that you've built over time to help you withstand that storm. So it's amazing that something that happened previously was able to help you navigate the perfect storm, and things are going to come up in the future, but you were able to extract those lessons. Do you feel like they were different storms, obviously different situations, but did you get the same feeling that came over you that you felt like you needed to distract from? I know for me, it was the unclarity that made me want to unplug. So, you go to vices and food and different things to try to distract yourself. But for me, it would make it worse. It'd make it temporarily feel better, but it would make the feeling heavier. And I wanted to get lighter. I wanted to gain more clarity. And that for me was not running to distraction, like running into the storm and withstanding it. And then eventually the sun would come out.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The only way over it is through it. Right. I mean, I think again, there's transitions we choose. So I think about, when I learned I'd be a mother, it's so interesting because we immediately embody it. Right. We can't see it. We can't, I just am having faith that I indeed am, God willing, growing this child in me. I'm still amazed that I was able to do that and keep a child alive. But, that was a positive one. That was one that I just stepped into and embodied immediately. You started eating and drinking in the way that would support it. I started, looking at groups of parents so I could learn from them, all the best practices that if we did those I knew if I did those type of things in other transitions would really serve me well. Mm-hmm. So they were all different. Like I said, some I chose and some I didn't choose. But over time, as I understood a framework, and one of it was getting quiet, not allowing the distractions to cloud it. And distractions are easy for me. To this day, I have to really focus and be intentional on what's leading me towards my greater vision. But as I learned a framework to help me navigate that in a better way, and each time learning a little bit more, I learned a lot from doing strategic plans as well. Some plans, and they were all big transitions. All of them were, a vision of who we'd never been before. And in order to be who we'd never been before, we had to think different than we ever had before. And we had to be an organization that we'd never been before. And so some strategic plans we skipped through, and sang along the way. And others we went kicking and screaming. And so as I tried to digest, as well as looking at people I'd coached and digest, what is it that allows us to joyfully get there and to not have the distractions and to navigate what we've been handed or what we've chosen and get to the destination that we're going for. There's commonalities and there's commonalities I carried forward. And then there's things I continue to learn. Every journey is a little bit different.
Yeah. What are some of those commonalities that you've seen in people you've served, organizations that have really gone above and beyond, and some of them that you take into your own personal life? Because I think we're people first that get brought into organizations. Obviously, we learn a lot by the collective, but a lot of the things I think we learn in organizations are things we need to learn as people.
Yeah, to know myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the, I coach through a 4-part kind of system, but one piece of it and fundamental is the Thrive method. And that really was born as a result of studying, educating, reviewing the strategic plans, reviewing my own personal, interviewing people and so forth. And one commonality that was extremely strong is not jumping into the to-do, but starting with the to-be. And we are in a world where we are addicted to our to-do list.
Yeah.
I am. I'll write it just so I can cross it off. It gives me great joy, to make the list and then check.
Yeah.
But if we could be as addicted to our to-be list, that would get us to our vision. That's where I think the magic is. Stephen Covey said it however long ago, start with the end in mind. It's pretty impossible to get where you want to go if you don't even know where you're going. And when you get crystal clear, and to this day, I still have myself do this practice, certainly my clients, but also myself, is any big thing. In 2024, I decided to be done to, all my life I had lost and gained weight. There was never an in between. In 2024, I said, Trace, you're gonna put this method to test, and you are, really gonna work it, and you're gonna make tweaks. And it is the one thing that changed my ability to lose and maintain 107 pounds. It is the one, and I started with the destination. I started with the target, and I, wrote a letter. I know it sounds corny. We all talk about it. Write a letter to yourself, but I was very specific on what did a year from now, 2 years from now look like. How was I, how did I feel? What was I wearing? Who was I with? What was I doing? What was on my calendar? What were my beliefs? How was I navigating life? What was I eating? What was I drinking? All the things. And then from there, I began to pull, and I got really crystal clear on that vision. But it's so natural. And to this day, when people ask me, how did you lose 100? They want me to tell them the one thing they can do today that'll lose the, 100 pounds by tomorrow. Yeah. It doesn't work that way. And I understand it. And I love them so much because I was that person. Mm-hmm. But if we start with the destination that we're headed towards, everything else is so clear. Mm-hmm. It's so freeing.
Yep. Yeah, it's amazing. I go through a process called Lifebook. It's a similar structure, but it all leads to a life vision. Then you frame your choices, like your daily micro choices around the life vision. And for some people that can seem like woo-woo to have a life vision, because there's so many, like you said, situations you choose and situations you don't choose that can come up. But it helps you provide a filter of, is this right for where I believe I want to go, or is it something I need to say no to potentially? So it gives you that decision-making framework, which I think is important for everybody to be intentional. Because if we're not intentional, then we get led by outside forces, which is something I hear a lot of people regretting is, maybe they have a mentor and they just wanted to follow that mentor's path at every step of the way, but they get the feeling of that's not for me. Like that was for them. It seems right. But they don't give themselves the freedom to explore other paths because they want certainty. And I think it goes back to your point about being fearful versus being forward focused, which you mentioned, and getting out of fear. So I'm curious with the people you coach and for yourself, how do you get out of the fear that debilitates you from potentially getting out of that, that season or that phase of transition so that you can start to make consistent forward momentum?
I believe it all starts with one of the most powerful words there is, and that's awareness. Mm-hmm. It's aware of our own thoughts. It's aware of, in a very busy, distracted world, with so much sensory stimulation that we are quite good at because we've been seeing, smelling, hearing, touching, tasting since we were born. To be still and be aware of the thoughts, the imagination, the will, the reasoning, the perspective that's going on internally, it takes work. It takes work. But with that awareness, that you can change anything that you absolutely want to. It starts with the thoughts. We're so used to seeing results because that's what is so visible. But the results are simply there they're only a result of our thoughts. And so I think when I get very clear on my thoughts and the beliefs that are driving it, that the fear is often not real. And so the way that I work through it and the way I coach people to work through it is I love acronyms. ACT is to just be very aware of what your thinking patterns are, The next thing they say is, well, how do I do that? Well, pay attention to what you complain about. Pay attention to what triggers you. Pay attention to what you're procrastinating that you know you shouldn't be. I'm not talking about complaining about the way I cook, but, complaining about things that are of significance, procrastinating things. They're going to tell you a lot. And then from there, once you're aware, you can see, challenge it, consider what else might be true. I had this awareness or belief that losing weight was really hard. And why do it? Because you're just going to gain it back. I had seen my parents do that. So my visual faculties, right? I had seen them do it. I had done it. But when I started to consider what else might be true, I knew lots of people that had kept it off. I knew lots of people that had enjoyed the journey. So could that also be true? And then if that is no longer serving me, to turn that belief, to turn it into something that does serve me. And so going through that act helps me identify when the fear is driving it. The fear of gaining it back, the fear of being miserable along the whole journey, all those things were getting in the way. And so from there, I could turn it into something that also was true and adapt it. And then through the will and through awareness, I could begin to adopt that belief.
Yeah. I think about turn as a reframe.
Right.
It's
right.
the ability to restructure the way we're approaching it through what we're challenging what we're complaining about. And then that allows you to have the awareness to make a different pivot.
Yes.
And thoughts become things, as you mentioned. So I think it all starts internally. I know we live in an externally needed, validation world. But I think if we find a way to almost pre-validate that we know this thought is right for us, there's something sometimes that happens in the outside world where it conspires with you. I'm a firm believer in that. But sometimes we don't give it enough time to breathe to get that conspiring actually happening because we're looking for that easy button, right? We're looking for the help me lose the 100 pounds tomorrow or today. And if we don't get the answer that we want, then we lose faith. So we go back into that state of fear, which stops us from being able to take the forward action.
I love that you just said that, because it is faith or fear, right? It's one of the two. We can't see either. We can't see faith and we can't see fear. So we're always choosing one of the two. And the way you just said it was, we lose the faith, so we step back into the fear. And it's always going to be that we're choosing one.
Yeah. So it sounds like you've always been a high achiever, going through the organization you were at, being the first female COO. COO is a big role because you are overseeing all of the different good and bad things that are happening. How important was getting into a role like that a coach for you? Because you coach other people now, but that had to come from somewhere of you saw that maybe you needed a specific type of coach. And what did that progressive process look like?
Oh, I think I've always had coaches, probably even from when I was born. There was somebody, I just have always, and before we even necessarily called it that, I mean, obviously growing up in sports and everything, you had a coach. I'm very familiar with that. But even before, we said mentors or getting an executive coach, or, I'm also a high performance coach. And whether the term or not, I've always been somebody that sought out people that were where I wanted to get to. People that were experts in a space that I was working towards. And so it was very important in my chief operating role. I had one that I personally paid for because it was very important for me. I was surrounded by CFOs, and they're really smart people. They're really smart people. Financial was not, luckily I had all of them, but I say I was smart on the people side. They were really smart people on the finance side. And so, I was always looking at what was the next level of development that I could do that could better serve people. And I think when you're really clear, I call your purpose factor the best of who you are to serve others. When you're really crystal clear on what that is, you know what you can develop further to be of greater service. And it's only through giving back the gifts of what you have to others that you will be fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
You can't be fulfilled if you're not giving it away. And so I was always, on the hunt to have more fulfillment, more joy, more fun, And so in order to do that, I had to continually step into my purpose at greater levels. And coaches were just the way to do that. And with that came additional success.
How did you find that purpose factor for yourself? What was that journey like, and any significant pivots and changes that happened to that purpose?
So I think purpose is this big thing. I know for me it was like, oh, it's going to be like Julia Roberts and Eat, Pray, Love. I got to leave for a year and go to Tuscany. And although that sounds nice right now, doesn't it? But it's not. And when I started working with a group, I'm a facilitator through the Purpose Factor, and they're actually with John Maxwell Leadership. And they had a very specific approach to uncovering the best of who you are and then the best way to serve others with it. And it demystified it a little bit for me. It became really clear and easy to step into. And probably the biggest pivot is it's not role dependent. And again, I think that goes back to, I looked at my parents entered into retirement and just excelled because they were really clear, even though they didn't say it, they were really clear on the best of who they were. And they were really clear on how to give it away. And so with that, they felt that same level of fulfillment and joy into retirement that they did when they were working. So I think when I realized it wasn't role dependent, how I deliver the best of who I am might change. Who I'm serving might change. The best of who I am might expand. But it's not dependent on a role. And when I realized that, it has becoming an empty nester, I didn't get stuck, right? That's a role I play. I still play. I play it in a different way. But my ability, I think probably the reasons that I've always been drawn to coaching, and it's my greatest love, is I have a real gift to be able to see in others what they don't and bring out in them what they won't. And so I can do that as a mom with her daughter under the roof, or as she blossoms into this amazing, beautiful girl. And so I can do that whether I was COO or whether I'm coaching one-on-one. And so I think when you become crystal clear on what the gifts you've been given and the best of everything you have, and you work relentlessly to develop that, and then who can you best serve with that, it's a pretty fulfilling life.
Do you think your parents had a framework or a structure to tease out what they were gifted with to be able to excel? I love how you use the word joy, because I think joy is such a better word than happiness and success and all these other things that that we chase. I believe those other things come when we are doing something that makes us feel joyful, like it. And there's that word to me is, it's something inside us that radiates when we're doing that thing or when we're expressing that skill that we have. And sometimes that doesn't feel happy. Like that doesn't feel giddy, but it feels like joyful. It feels like you're doing something that you're meant to do. Do you feel like your parents just rode the joy wave, or did they have a framework like the Purpose Factor, where they were like, I'm really good at talking to people, or I'm really good at food, or whatever that thing was? Did they have that, or did they just embody it?
I don't know that they had a formal discovery process, but I think they were both very intuitive, and I think they were both very aware. They were still enough to be aware of the gifts they were given. My dad knew his ability to connect and to build a relationship was unmatched. It was phenomenal, and that he could bring out something in everybody. I know that's a big part of where I get it from. He could bring out something. He could connect with the most challenging person. He could find that commonality and bring them up a notch, help them, want to rise a little bit further. And my mom was an educator. She was the ultimate teacher and educator, and had such a passionate, but patient and caring way about her, that she could instill upon anybody the desire to learn, the desire to feel worthy of learning. And so whether that was they would feed the homeless every Friday in a downtown church in Richmond, Virginia, Centenary United Methodist. And my dad's role was he was always, they didn't let him know the food because he was eating it the whole time, but he would give the plates, and his ability to make the person that was literally homeless laugh and feel hope was amazing. While my mom, through cooking, she loved to cook, but through cooking and serving was able to also inspire them maybe to read a book that took them to a place they'd never go, to be curious about how they might have more. And so I don't know that they had a framework for it, but they certainly had a level of quietness and stillness to be aware of what their gifts were, and then a desire to give them back to others.
Yeah, it sounds like they were both listeners. They like listened to the environment, even if it sounds like your dad would speak hope into people. I'm curious what you felt about that as his daughter. How did that skill that he had like give you hope that you could achieve whatever you wanted to achieve?
Well, I'll tell you this, Greg. So when I saw my parents' house, my mom, when we got her settled into an independent living home a couple of years ago, and I was going through the whole house, and on the side of the fridge was my dean's list from college. He had laminated and framed, and it was still on the side of the fridge. So to say there was pride and belief and just how important that is to have cheerleaders in your corner. Seeing that anything is possible for you. So how dare we not do that for ourselves? I think was a big takeaway for me. Is my dad always knew that I would be the first female. Like that was never even in question. And he wasn't me. I am me. So how dare I not have the belief that anything I truly desire for the good is not potential for me? And so I think that was a big take. He was a brilliant businessman. That was a big takeaway for me from him. And I challenge myself at times. I still hear him nodding me saying, Grace, how dare you? How dare you not believe that you can do this? So, and my mom, I think her lessons were very important for me, that patience is a gift. And sometimes being kind is not kind, sometimes being gentle and not rushed is a real gift as well. So I think I took both different things from both of them, but definitely from my dad was this responsibility to believe in yourself. Like, you can do anything.
Hey everyone, this episode is sponsored by my company, Valor Cybersecurity, where we help defense contractors navigate the uncharted waters of cybersecurity compliance. As a cyber attack victim myself, I know the impact that this plays in people's lives, and at Valor, we solve that each and every day. If you're a defense contractor feeling frustrated and confused when it comes to cybersecurity compliance, visit valor-cybersecurity.com, take our free assessment, and get started on your journey to clarity in cybersecurity.
Yeah, I think that's it's foundational. I see it in sports very frequently, but also in the business world now. You would think it's a commonality to believe in yourself, and I know it wanes. Like, there's different things we're facing that we may not believe we can do, but it also is foundational to. And I think that question you ask is, how dare you not believe in yourself? And there's so many other people that do believe in you. I think we face that tug quite a bit when we're stretching ourselves outside of our comfort zone. Do you find that with the people that you coach or the people that you were in the organization with, maybe the CFOs that were extremely brilliant, but they really didn't have that foundational belief in themselves? And then if so, like how can we bring that to the outside world? So it's more common to start with belief, to have that be a foundational trait, for young people, and then as they transition into their adulthood.
The CFOs I worked for were very traditionally educated through some of the best traditional institutions we have in this country. And I think through that process, we're often encouraged to perform, not explore, right? And in grade school, and then, going through high school and into college even, there's a right answer. There is a framework. There are lines to stay within. There are rules to follow. And it's not always about asking how else might we think about this? What else could be true? How else might we approach this? And I think a lot of times their comfort was in that perform, not explore. And so I think going back to a place of childlike curiosity, to explore what is possible, what is, things that we haven't even considered. Thank goodness for our imaginations, right? Everything was imagined before it was. And so I think giving ourselves that, and it's fun. Giving ourselves that freedom to have that fun, to explore, and to start with the belief. I go back to being a mom. I had a belief that I would successfully be a mom. I had nothing to base that on. I had no experience. I remember my sister saying, she was a hoot. She was a journalist. And she said, Trace, I don't know that you're going to know how to give birth. I was like, Paige, I'm pretty sure when I get to the hospital, we're going to figure it out. Of all the things I'm concerned about, it's not that. But, there was just a belief that I would be a mom, that I would deliver a baby, I'd be a mom, and I, would figure it out. And so if we just it goes back to faith. If we just had some faith over fear, I think it could change. The other thing I will say is you also have to quiet the people that are how dare you believe in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's that out there too. There's that noise, and you have to push that noise out. I remember the day of the announcement that I would be the chief operating officer. And I remember there were other more tenured, more educated, higher level people. And there was how dare you believe yourself? How dare you believe in yourself that much? And in those cases, you have to, if there's something to learn it from that. But otherwise, you need to move on towards your vision of what you're becoming.
Yep. Yeah, the perform versus explore, I think that's such a breakthrough. Is we learn through exploration, through questions, not always through doing what we feel is what we should do. That makes sense?
Yes.
And I think as kids, we're all explorers. Like we're all put on this earth to explore something, exploit something for the benefit of others, or there's a number of ways people frame it. But I think that trait of exploration is something that I see in all the people that I admire, is they're exploring and learning, and that can look like a performance, but there's a big difference between the two. And I'm curious if you've seen that in people that either you look up to or that you feel like have been in your coaching structure, if you've seen traits that indicate more of a performance than an exploration.
It was funny. I was thinking last night as there were some school closings coming across the screens, and I had a little bit of flashback to a CEO that I learned a lot of lessons about who I didn't want to be from. I was blessed to work with many amazing CEOs, but and I remembered, being on a flight that got delayed into Buffalo, New York on a wintry day, and I landed at midnight, and my phone was ringing from the CEO who was livid that one of our campuses was doing a delay in the morning. And what in the world was that campus president thinking? And I remember, quieting my defense mechanisms and just reiterating to her that I had hired really amazing people to lead our campuses. I've entrusted them with millions of dollars in Title IV financial aid, and to report into important conversations with the Board of Nursing and Department of Ed and regional accrediting bodies. I feel extremely confident in their ability to make a decision to delay a campus for an hour or two. But it also reminded me the power of the word why, okay? And why as it relates to explore and curiosity versus why as it relates to somebody that has stayed in that perform category. So on the flip side of that, I had another CEO who asked why a lot, and it was truly out of curiosity and exploring. He wanted to explore, how was I thinking about this? He wanted to get in my mind a little bit. He wanted to explore what I thought might else be possible or potential. And versus the why of performing, the why you did it this way, the more confrontational, the more boxing you into a corner with the why and assuming it's a wrong answer or a wrong approach. So I've seen it played out, and I think there's a extreme correlation, especially when coaching and developing others, but also yourself. When you explore, when you question why from curiosity, when you explore from curiosity versus to catch somebody, to box them in a corner, or to why from a perform, I think the success is far greater when you approach it from the explore.
Absolutely. One of the things that comes to mind is consistency. I think consistency was very important for me as an athlete, and is very important for me today as a business owner. But we're constantly changing as people, and sometimes that can come off to other people as inconsistent because you're not always the same. And with the company you were at, I'm sure they went through different phases and stages, and you had to kind of flex and adapt and change. What comes to mind when you think of consistency, like being consistent? Is it important to embrace, or not as important when it comes to, you have that purpose? Obviously, having that purpose in mind consistently is important, but the consistency to explore, versus perform, like going back to that why, like if you feel like you have to ask the why around the performance versus the why to explore, and that may make you seem inconsistent. And you spent a long time at one organization, and I feel like that required a level of consistency to maintain those relationships, even that when you had leaders that you learned what not to do. And maybe they were inconsistent, which, rubbed off on you in a way that was more negative than positive.
Yeah, it's a great question. I will tell you the same thing that I told one of my favorite mentors, and who was actually a CEO as well. I am consistently intentional.
Mm-hmm.
And when he understood that, he had his suits lined up in the closet. Monday was this blue suit, Tuesday was the tan suit, Wednesday was the, right? And that was consistency. Checking the emails, never leaving with more than 10 in his inbox. I was consistently intentional. So at first, it would drive him crazy that, well, last week you were spending time in Albany, and that was, why aren't you consistently? Because I'm consistently intentional. And right now my intention is in Ohio, where we have new leadership. So my consistency with my intentionality is what's consistent. On my weight loss journey, consistency in the beginning was intermittent fasting in 100 ounces.
Mm-hmm.
As I continue every day to be intentional in the choices that I make to get me further faster in a more joyous way, a joyful journey. I preach all the time. If you're not enjoying the journey, what are you doing? Yeah. That changed. So it might look like I wasn't consistent. It might look like, well, what happened to the 100 ounces of water? What happened? No, my intention changed. And then I was, but I was consistently intentional.
Yeah. There's a lot of peace in that clarity of intention, because the intention can remain the same, but the action changes because the environment's constantly changing. And obviously it's a filter, but I'm trying to help the audience decipher between the intention and the action. So I'm curious how you describe having that consistent intention, but recognizing that the action you need to take may change, because I think people like to bucket intention and action into the same thing. And it's like, if you're not taking the same action, then the intention has changed.
So I think one thing that's very helpful for me is, again, if you start with the end in mind, you have that very clear vision of where you're heading. So I had a very clear vision that I was becoming the healthiest version, what that looked like, what it felt like, what a day in the life of the healthiest version looked like. And then going into that day, asking myself, what is the one or two things I can do that will make everything else easier or unnecessary? And because there's a lot of things I could do, again, that addiction to the to-do list. But what are the one or two things So in the beginning for me, the one or two things that would make everything else easier or unnecessary was intermittent fasting, because I didn't need to track macros. It kind of limited it. But as time went on, the one or two things changed. So my vision didn't change. But when I asked the question around the intention and what would be the one or two things that allowed me to get there, the actions changed. So that's been a great, I think, framework for me and people that I coach to help them really get uber sensitive on and focused and prioritized on the actions that will lead them towards their vision intentionally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the easy and did you say easy and unnecessary?
Yeah, the one or two things that will make everything else easier or even unnecessary.
Yeah. Yeah. That's clarity of choice.
Yeah.
Right. And I think we as humans can overcomplicate things. And I think that's why we need coaches. That's why I continually need coaches, and I need it in baseball. I was a pitcher, so I would try to overcomplicate making the pitch that I threw so good that nobody could ever hit it. But if it was just average, hitting a baseball is an extremely hard thing to do. So I would try to make the pitch perfect, which would make it not as effective. But when I just had the intention of like throwing it to the glove and like just letting things move just a little bit and not trying to overdo it, I bring that into my life today. Is it doesn't need to be the exact perfect action, but if I have the intention that's clear and I make the choice to throw it to the glove versus trying to make it perfect, there's a lot of freedom and a lot of joy, joy in that, because I'm not holding myself to like an unmeetable standard, because that's the cycle of never feeling joy because it's never good enough.
Yeah. You said something really interesting too. You said you made the choice.
Right.
I think when we have those actions and we've made the choice, a lot of times we'll start to ask the wrong question to ourselves. We'll start to ask, what do we feel like versus what we've decided? So you made the choice, right? And so I was having this conversation the other night with my son where he said he didn't like going to the gym, and he's been really on a health mission and gaining muscle. And as it doesn't matter what you feel like, feeling will come and go. It's what you've decided. You decided this. And so when we stop asking what we feel like and we start asking what we've decided to get to that, it kind of, it clears the way a little bit more too.
Yeah.
Makes it easier, kills the complexity.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Because we start to second guess, and then should I go to the gym? Am I going to get hurt? Like it's like all of those.
All the what ifs come into play.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I like the makes it easy and unnecessary. That's a good frame to have when you're going into transformation. Choices are extremely important. On what's been top of mind for you with the people that you've coached? Obviously the world's going through a lot of changes. I think change is constant, but with everything going on in the landscape, what are some things that have been really top of mind as you take all the skills you've developed, as a COO, as an executive, coming across many other executives, and now continuing to coach people? Like, what are the hot button topics that continue to come up as themes?
My business is called The More Mentor, and I do truly believe that we're all searching for more. We're searching for more health, wealth, joy, fun, freedom, fulfillment, and we want more of those good things in this one beautiful life we've been given. And helping people really step into the fact that we are meant to expand, not contract. We're meant to grow, not stand still. We're meant to create, not just consume. We're meant to thrive, not survive. And we truly are meant for more of all those good things, is pretty powerful. And then helping them to become crystal clear, because a lot of the group that I work with, and I think it's in general, is it's so easy to get stuck in the day to day, that the days go by and the years go by and the weeks go by. And we were just stuck in this Groundhog Day, and we're already busy. And so how do we make time to get out of that and into our to-be list, I think is a common theme. And so then when a big transition, which is where we started the conversation, occurs, there's a spiral. And, I've been there in the spiral. We talked about that. And if there's a way for me to help somebody not have those years, not have those days, weeks, or months be a spiral, but to get clarity, to get intentional, to have that clear vision, to not waste that precious time, to have the mores that they want out of life. That's certainly what I love to help people with. But I definitely see this trend of navigating transitions is tough in the busy world that we exist in and live in. It's already pretty busy. And then you add in a big transition.
Yeah, it's a matter of time before we all go through the next transition.
Right.
So how do we feel more, learn more, express more, knowing that that's coming, but not being in that fearful state of holding on or trying to control the next transition that we're going to go through. I feel like a lot of people today, with all the uncertainty, are in that state of just like holding on until it happens. And then after the fact, realizing that the outcome or the situation didn't feel any different, whether they had been in that closed, fearful state or if they were more open and faithful. It typically passes with some amount of time, and that's something I've embraced personally. But I try to really impart on people, personally and professionally, that the crisis, the transition, it's going to come, whether you think you're in control of it or not. And I think that there's a piece in that, even though that could be a huge negative season in their life. I'm in the cybersecurity business, so like cyber attacks are coming,
Right.
But a lot of companies, they either deny it and run away from it, and I know they're thinking, and that's even a bigger spiral. But the ones that know, they have confidence in what they have in place, and they know eventually it's going to come, but they're going to be prepared. So they're faithful that they're going to withstand it and they're going to get through it. Those companies, you walk in, there's just a lot more peace. There's way less stress. There's way less holding on to the uncertainty in such a tight way. And you can feel that stress in people's nervous system. And that's one of the reasons I got into the business was they always told me as a baseball player, I had a slow heartbeat. So I was able to, in this stressful situation, like the team could look and feel my energy in a way that I was able to it was like any other situation. So I tried to find a way to take that superpower into a very high stress, high stakes type industry. And that's the biggest point of feedback that we get as a team, is not that we work with you just for you guys being cybersecurity experts, but because you're able to be the calm in the storm. You're able to help us confront a complex topic. And I think more people should look for those traits within themselves that can be, like you said, they can be repurposed. The role changes, but those foundational things you have in yourself can be repurposed anywhere you decide to put it. Just like your parents transitioning from into the retirement world, they still had those same traits of hope, of education, of learning, and they just repointed it to a new chapter. It seems like flawlessly and effortlessly, because they knew what they inherently had. I think we're all searching for that. Like that to me is a state of joy. That's where you look back on life and you're like, I exploited myself in the service of others in a way that, and exploit's a weird word, but it's really, I found what it was and I took advantage of what I'm strong at to benefit others. And I just want to see more of that in the world.
That's amazing.
So I
Yeah,
appreciate what you're doing.
as you were talking, I was thinking about I publish books, and I have two books I'm releasing in early 2026. And I was sitting with a group of publishers, and they had Dean Graziato. I always say his name wrong.
Graziosi.
Yes, I know. I say it wrong all the time, and I try to say it right. But he was talking about kind of his 14 life lessons, and one of them was know the business you're in and the business you're becoming. And I was thinking of that as you were talking, and I think when you know the business you're in, also sometimes when I have a coaching client that feels really stuck and they feel, all the uncertainty that's out there and so forth, I'll ask them, tell me if there's anything wrong right now, like in this moment. Is anything wrong, or what can we be joyful for? Because in this moment, usually everything's okay. There's shelter, there's, they're warm, unless they're in Buffalo, New York, but there's not. And so it brings them back into the now and the appreciation for the here and now, but also the business you're becoming. And, if you're not looking at that vision of yourself, that vision of the company, if you're not a taxi looking at Uber and then looking at what is the driverless car, Waymo, I think took one of those in California. I don't know. But
it's scary.
Yeah, it's a little scary. One was in an accident right in front of us. I was like, oh, I'm rethinking this choice. But, if you've got to be looking at the business you're in and the here and now and who you are right now, and what you can be grateful for, and truly what's wrong in this moment. There's nothing wrong in this moment.
Yeah.
And then the business you're becoming, I think is a good life lesson from him.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a great guy. He has a lot of clarity. I admire his clarity. And he keeps telling the world how he found the clarity. And I think we sometimes have to repeat things over and over again to the world for it to find the right person at the right time. Sometimes we're putting things out in the world that it's not the right time for everybody to find it, but we have to be going back to consistency. When we feel that message we need to put out, we just need to continue to put it out in a way where people can find it when the time is right. And I think that's the beauty of podcasting and YouTube and social media is some of that stuff never goes away, which is good and bad.
Yeah.
but people can find it in hundreds of years from now, hopefully, when we're far gone from the earth. But some of these consistencies are life principles that are timeless. And I'm a firm believer that we shouldn't repeat history and over again. Like each generation, we're just learning the same lessons over and over again, but starting each generation with the foundational lessons of the previous one. And that to me is legacy is how can you leave the people around you with everything you learned? And then obviously they can learn the lessons on their own, but start with some of those, foundational, purpose factors, like you mentioned. Tracy Nannery, one of the ways we like to close out the show, because we're all about connection, and a lot of the concepts we discussed today are foundational to what we feel like a connected mindset is. So curious, what does the word connection mean to you?
Connection is greater than myself. So it's interesting. I was really thinking about the name of your podcast last night and just how much I loved it, because they're just two powerful words, probably two of the most powerful words. And I was thinking, gosh, everything starts with the mind. Everything starts with mindset, attitudes, beliefs, values, right? And that's internal. That's us, right? And then, but it all, at the end of the day, connection is everything. Everything is, I think it's one, I don't know how much research or studies you've done in the blue zones. I was just in Costa Rica, which is a blue zone. And one of the commonality amongst all the blue zones where people live to be over 100, and they are living. They're not just existing, they're living, they're active. But the commonality was the connections. The commonality was they lived in houses with families. They weren't in a retirement home where family never came to visit. And I think connection in a busy world, in an online digital world, is more important than ever. That there is no joy if we don't have a connected experience. There is no joy. And I think my grandma Fleece probably said it best. She was, I come from educators and I come from business people. They're one of the two. And she was a very early educator. And one day when I was visiting her, I asked her how her week was, and she was telling me on Monday about her day. And it sounded wonderful, but I could tell she was a little melancholy over it. And I was like, Grandma Fleece, what's wrong? And she said, I didn't have anybody to tell it about at the end of the day. And I've really thought about that. And she wasn't saying it to make me feel guilty, as a grandmother can do, but she was sharing it with me because it was a really big life lesson. At the end of the day, if the best thing in the world has happened to you and you couldn't tell a soul, does it matter? It really doesn't. Yeah. And so connectedness is everything. It is, I think, it gets us outside of ourselves. This is bigger than ourselves. And it is really what allows everything else to be. So I love the name of the podcast.
Yeah. Tracy, I appreciate what you're putting out in the world, and looking forward to staying connected.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, thank you so much for listening. If you're feeling more connected from this episode, please like, subscribe, and share with someone that you care about. And I'll see you on the next episode of the Connected Mindset Podcast.